everybody, welcome back to another JLTY Plus. I am so happy to welcome back a second time guest. I'm not sure if I have done a repeat guest yet, unless it's my own producer. So Adam,
Oh wow.
yeah, I think you have the honor of being my first repeat guest. And so you're well on your way to becoming the Alec Baldwin of JLTY.
I hope only in a good way and not in all the bad ways.
Me too.
I was excited to come back. I had so much fun talking to you the first time. So,
well, Adam, tell everyone a little bit about yourselves for people who are just catching up.
So I'm a writer and comedian. Currently, I'm working for the Babylon Bee, helping them write headlines. I co-host their podcast, help them write sketches over there. Before that, I was a writer at the Ellen DeGeneres Show for 10 years. I worked as a segment producer's assistant at Conan for several years before that. And I also tour the country doing stand-up as often as my work schedule allows me. So,
have you been out recently?
Yeah, it's actually been really nice over the last few months. I feel like over the last 6 months, things have around the country have kind of been opening up more and more. Here in LA, of course, we were kind of the last to do away with all the mandates, and there's still rumors of it coming back from time to time. But I've been traveling around the country. I was in Ohio. I did 2 great shows there's a club called Crackpots and one called The Funny Farm. I'm going to be at a fundraiser show in Grand Rapids, Michigan, April 22nd and 23rd. I'm going to be at a comedy festival in Nebraska in June. So a lot of the clubs have been opening up again. They're at full capacity, and the audiences have just been great. I think people are really ready to be back, seeing whether it's comedy or music or any live performance, just kind of enjoying life again.
Oh yeah, my husband and my daughter, our 14-year-old, are big music fans, and they love concerts. So they have finally started up the concert going, and it was like touch and go there for a while because we had all the like the vax mandates and stuff. Like even we were opening up, and my daughter is not vaccinated. We have not allowed her to get vaccinated. And so, but she loves concerts. And she just couldn't go anywhere. It was so sad. We used like a fake test for a while.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like you could, if you did it like within 24 hours and it's negative, like that. But yeah, but now things seem to be loosening up. Like even LA can't really keep up with the facade anymore.
I'm curious, before we get into the vax mandates of who was the first concert when she could finally go back, like who was the first concert they wanted to go see?
She went to see J-Lo.
Oh, I don't know if I'm familiar with them.
You probably wouldn't be familiar with like any of the stuff because you're 150,000 years old compared to.
That's what I thought that's where you're going with that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I know this it sounds super lame when I say it out loud, but I'm not a huge music fan. I mean, I like music. I don't hate music. Like I'm not a psychic, but I don't like concerts. I don't like having to like stand in one place for 6 hours and get there early. I hate the whole thing, but they love that experience. So, and then she recently went to, my husband took both our children, our son's almost 20 now, to see Tyler, the Creator in
see, Tyler the Creator, I know some of what the kids are into.
Yeah. It was cool. It was fun. We actually let them go to that concert by themselves because it was at Mandalay Bay. And so we all got a room there, and they went to the concert hall, and then we just gambled, drank all night. It was fun.
Yeah, but I'm so glad the vax mandates are over. They never should have existed in the first place. And I've never been like a big anti-vaxxer. I just have always said it's a personal choice. I don't think it's right to force anyone to get it, and certainly not to make it a condition of entering businesses or going to events. And the way they enforced it in LA was so stupid and ridiculous, because during that whole time, I would always just say I refuse to show a card because I don't think it's anyone's business who's vaccinated, who's not.
Same here.
But I would go to bars, and some places they would not let you in at all if you didn't show the card. And you go, okay, I'm going to go to the bar next door, and they would let you in, and it was fine. It was just completely arbitrary who decided to, follow the rules and who didn't. I remember at one point, I had 2 friends who came out to visit LA during the first weeks of the vax mandates in November. And they were going to see, I got them tickets to the Ellen show. It was after I left, but I got them tickets to be in the audience. And the night before, we were going to go to a show at the Comedy Store. And so at the Comedy Store, they both had their vaccine passes. but I didn't. And when I got up to the door, they were checking Vax passes. And I said, look, I can get a negative COVID test, and I have the antigen blood test because I had COVID. So I have the antibody test. And they said, no, we need a vaccine card. So I wasn't allowed in at the Comedy Store. Then the next day when my friends tried to go see Ellen, they called me in the middle of the day and they're like upset. They're like, we can't get in because we have our Vax card, but we didn't see in the fine print, you also need a negative COVID
Oh my
test.
gosh.
So it's, within a mile of each other. One place you need a Vax mandate and they won't accept a test or an antibody test. A mile away, you have the vaccine card, but you don't have the negative COVID test. So they give you a hard time getting it. It's all just made up rules that were intended to make life difficult for people who weren't complying. It had nothing to do with
You're right.
any benefit to
Right.
society. It was just, we want to find a way to punish and make it difficult for people who aren't following our rules.
It was so stupid. I mean, it's still stupid. Like you're still
Yeah.
seeing some silliness in LA, and it's sad because LA isn't really back yet. I mean, it's still like
Yeah.
driving around. It still feels like it's limping along. But yeah, it was so ridiculous the whole time. I have a Vax card. Like I got the vaccine, but I refused to go places where I needed it.
Yeah.
And we went to Palm Springs over the summer, and like Palm Springs is like hoity-toity area, and then right outside is like Redneckville of Palm Springs.
Yeah.
Everywhere outside of Palm Springs was like, we're ignoring everything, do what you want, like we don't care. And then Palm Springs was like, we need a Vax card for you to eat inside. And so my husband took me to one restaurant, and we did. And I remember I showed, like, the hostess was an older lady. It was like a family business, and she seemed like mortified to have to do it, and I remember I showed it to her, and then I just felt so icky eating, not to judge anyone who was doing it, but just saying, like, for me, I'm like, this is dystopian. Like I can't do this and sit here in good conscience and think I had to show some kind of special paper to get it in the United States of America, to get in
Yeah.
and eat. And we're
It's
not
crazy.
talking about a pandemic that is like the Black Plague that's striking down people. It just was so offensive. And then I think we all could have gotten on board with even some stricter measures if any of it made sense. But I think because the virus was never as terrible as we were promised it was going to be, nothing they were going to do would have ever made sense.
Yeah. And there's an enormous difference. I think, like I encourage my parents to get the vaccine because they're older, they're high risk. They hadn't had COVID already. I'm very much in favor of people getting it if it will make them safer. But then when it became, well, you need another booster shot and another booster shot and another booster shot, at some point, everyone is going to say, look, we're not going to just keep going along with this if it's not giving us any long lasting immunity. And it seems like they're still kind of figuring out how long it lasts, how strong it is, which variants it will work against, which it won't. They did the same thing with all the mask rules, changing them, saying they're not effective. Now they are effective. Now you can wear a cloth mask. Now a cloth mask doesn't work. And all those studies showed that, especially in California, I don't know around the country, but there were studies based on the counties that had mask mandates and the counties that didn't. And there was no difference in the overall cases and deaths in the end. It was just, these arbitrary rules to kind of follow.
Well, it's like you say, it was about compliance, because
Yeah.
what the people in charge don't want is for you to be thinking for yourself.
Yeah.
This is why we arrested people for surfing alone in the ocean.
Oh my gosh, yeah, on a paddleboard with the tops after it.
I hope we really look back on this period of time with great shame.
Yes. Hopefully with shame, but hopefully we can laugh about it in the future.
I hope we
ridiculous
can.
It was, because
as
it was
opposed
insane.
to being on like round 48 of lockdowns and mask mandates.
Yeah.
I know. Well, one of the things that has been really great about restrictions lifting is traveling. And you have said that you've been traveling, doing some comedy, and like, what is life like? I know what I think, so I want to know what you think about what life is like outside of California when you go to the rest of the states.
Oh man, it's starting to kind of even out now, but for the last 6 months, it was crazy. I kind of tried to refrain from using this term because I felt it was sensational at first, but I started using it. I was like, I'm visiting the free states, and then I'm coming back to California. And it's so bizarre how these people live in this bubble of the media they consume and the people they socialize with, the people they work with, and how the just the local government here in LA and the state government is in California. There are so many millions of people in these huge population centers that think this is what life is like. They think everyone's wearing masks, everyone's social distancing, everyone has to show a vaccine to get in anywhere. And you fly almost anywhere else. You get off the plane in Texas, you go to, I've been to Oklahoma, Tennessee, even places that aren't particularly red states, like back in Pennsylvania, where I'm from, middle of the country, anywhere I would go, you get off and I would go to gyms without a mask, and I would go to comedy clubs and they'd be at full capacity. And people, there's a few people who, if you want to choose to wear a mask, that's up to you. If you feel it makes you safer, go for it. But no one cares about this. And then you get back to LA, and it's like, put your mask on every time you go inside, even outside. There's tons of people wearing masks. You have to show your vaccine pass to get into the gym. And it was just this sense of, do you understand that this is not what life is like? Do you understand if you leave California, and I think to some degree New York City was like this also, if you leave these liberal controlled huge cities, even in California, if you get outside of LA, you could go to places and it's like the pandemic is over and people are moving on with their lives. And it's this weird sense of, I know some people who have a lot of hatred and animosity and anger when they see people wearing the masks and who are supporting these mandates. And it makes me mad that they're trying to force it on other people. But I also feel bad for them sometimes, because I would talk to friends in like even up to August and September of last year, and they would say things like, well, me and my family just felt comfortable enough to go to a restaurant for the first time
Oh
in
my
a year and a half.
gosh.
And I'm like, what have you been doing? I've gone out to bars and
I
restaurants every week
know.
since this thing
That
started.
that is
You don't have to live, you
flabbergasting.
like wash your hands, be safe. At the
Sure.
time when it seemed like masks were doing something, like if you feel like it's doing something, wear a mask. But you don't have to follow these rules. And the rest of the world is not like this.
That is so crazy because yeah, that is what I'm hearing. Well, more so I want to talk about celebrity in a little bit and what's happened
Uh,
to the office of celebrity over COVID. But I'm hearing particularly from people who are in like my end of the industry, like reporting, opinion journalism, that kind of stuff. But bigger names, yeah, like, and they're in the bubbles, they're in LA, they're in New York, particularly. I was just reading, I don't know who it was recently who was like, yeah, I mean, like just a couple months ago, like, yeah, I finally felt good enough to go to
yeah,
a out for dinner. And it's like, what the hell? What in
yeah,
the hell have you been doing this whole time? What a miserable life you must be leading. Like, life is going on out there, even in places where we think it's not. Like, even in parts of
yeah,
Europe, people are like, you know what, screw it. Like, it's just so weird to think that even as late as this past winter, like even at Christmas, like at Christmas, I was watching Good Morning America, and they were having a segment on like, what do you do if you have a party? Like, you can make your guests wait in the garage while you do a rapid test, and then you can pass. And like, this
yeah.
is over. What are you doing?
It's
People are,
crazy.
we're so scared.
Yes.
And I think that fear, though, tell me what you think it is. I think in a lot of ways, for a lot of people, that fear turned, though, during the pandemic from genuine fear to like identity, right? Like, I am a
Yeah.
person who identifies as someone who's being responsible, someone who cares about the safety of others, someone who, I'm all in this together, and the rest of you are probably like MAGA weirdos because
Hmm.
you don't want to lock yourself away for 2 whole years in your house. I think for a lot of people, that fear sort of internalized as politics.
Yes. I think it definitely became about sort of identity, virtue signaling how good you are, and judging people who weren't following the rules. And I think there was also an element, and it's tied all up in that, of, it takes a lot to admit that you were wrong, or to admit that, your side is going overboard with some of this stuff. So, I think a lot of people started to see at some point, well, yeah, the vaccine worked to some degree and was good to get, but are we really going to force people to get boosters every 4 months and check to get into events and restaurants? Is that a way that we want to live? The mask science really kind of fell apart, but it's still hard for people to say, oh no, maybe these people that they hated the so-called MAGA people and the evil Republicans and the evil independents, libertarians and conservatives and all these people. They don't ever want to say, you know, maybe these Democratic governors like Gavin Newsom, like Andrew Cuomo, maybe they weren't completely honest. Maybe they did get things wrong. Maybe they were hypocrites. Maybe we did support things that weren't justified by science. So they want to still cling to this idea that they were right. And like you said, it becomes a big identity thing of, you know, we're right and everyone else is wrong, and we have to judge them and punish them for it. And it's interesting because you mentioned, you know, the rest of the world. Back in August, I went to Romania. It was the only time I traveled outside the country during the pandemic. I had a friend there that I've been trying to visit I tried to visit in the year of the pandemic, and then it got canceled in 2020. But I went there and we had a layover in the Munich airport. And the belief here in America, and I'm sure there are some parts of the world where they were just as strict as LA or New York, but it was always fluctuating everywhere. Whenever you saw this stuff in the news, it was like, well, now this place is going into lockdown. Well, now this place is a vaccine mandate. Well, now they're backing off. Now they're changing it. But when I was in the airport in Munich, there were signs everywhere saying you had to wear masks, but half the staff wasn't even wearing masks.
Oh, wow.
Half the people walking around didn't have masks. When I got to Romania, I was there for a little over a week. There was only one place I ever went into. It was a convenience store in one of the big cities where they were strict about wearing masks when you walk in. The rest of it was like the pandemic didn't exist. You could hang out with people, you could go to cafes, you could go to restaurants, travel all over the place. And, you know, there was this perception here, I even heard this from some people on the left, that Americans were somehow the ones being irresponsible, and we were the country where people weren't following the rules, and we were bad for that because we're all,
right.
you know, like you said, MAGA weirdos who don't follow the rules.
My freedoms.
Go, you know, this debate was happening everywhere, and there were lots of places that weren't strict about it.
Yeah, man. I think I was done with everything by October of 2020. And I got a gig out in Georgia. And so that was going to be like my first time flying since the pandemic had started in March. And I was super nervous. I was still like on the fence about how I was feeling. Like originally I was like, okay, let's do our part, our 15 days. And then I was starting to feel like, okay, I don't think this is what we were promised it was going to be.
Yeah.
And so I got on that plane and went to Georgia, and that was really at the height of like, we didn't even have a vaccine yet. And even in Georgia, it was like, you know, if you're in a business, people are wearing masks, but the bars were open. Like I was staying in a college town and the kids were just packed into those bars, like, you know, wall to wall. And that's when, and then I came home and I flew home, and that was when flights were empty, which was super fun. But and then I got off the plane. I remember realizing like, no, we're doing this wrong. Like I was like, I'm over it. And that was, you know, unfortunately had like another 2 years to go before everybody else caught up. But yeah, I remember. And I think for a lot of people, like the ones who got over it faster were the ones that had things to do and places to go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, people who had things to do and places to go got over it faster. And there's a very real conversation that I think was being had among people individually, but the media, especially the left-wing media, kind of avoided this discussion. Is, you know, the COVID obviously is a serious disease. There were people that had serious complications and a lot of people died from it. Now, it wasn't like Black Plague. It's not like everyone who got it was dropping dead left and right, but it was a serious thing. But there's also a very real quality of life kind of debate to be had, where when I chose to travel around the country, like I said, I eventually did get COVID, and I knew that was a risk that I was taking. But when I look back on it, it's like, well, I got to go to Pennsylvania to see my family. When I was around my parents who are old and high risk, I was very strict about wearing a mask, social distancing, especially at the height of the pandemic, getting tested before I would spend time with them. I was as cautious as I could be, but I had these experiences of going out to do stand-up for people all over the place, getting to see my family. Like I said, getting to travel to Romania. I took a road trip across the country, like visit places I hadn't seen. Do you really want to trade all that for this safety or perceived safety from a virus that you have a 99% chance of surviving? You know, there's a path. Do we really want to restrict everyone's lives? And does the government have the right to shut down people's lives forcibly in that sort of situation when some people might choose to just live their life as normal, accepting that the risk is out there.
But I just can't believe how many people are out there that are like, yes, that is right. That is
Yes,
the right thing to do.
it's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And I always tell people, like, I differ from a lot of my family on this issue. And I always say, like, I know that you say that putting on your mask, being forced to put on your mask, vax mandates, closing schools and businesses, that's what you have to do for the greater good. But I feel like defending your right to make your own decisions is for the greater good. I think that's
Absolutely.
the
I
greater
agree
good.
100%.
So,
Yeah.
well, go
No,
ahead.
go ahead. It reminds me, we had an interview with Dennis Prager at the Babylon Bee recently, and we were talking about something along these lines. And the point he made is something he said it before, that people, a lot of people don't want freedom or would choose safety over freedom. They essentially would rather be taken care of and kept safe in a cage, so to speak, rather than having freedom and all the sort of risks and issues that come along with both the risks that are out there and the responsibility that it takes to kind of live your own life and make your own decisions. And I think that's a much broader sort of psychological and philosophical element to all this that includes the sort of COVID restrictions, but goes beyond that into, the different political debates in our country with keeping people safe from words and keeping people, safe from different points of view and all this stuff. There are people that just want to be safe and controlled, and they don't value freedom. Like, I say, when you say that, I agree with you 100%, but there's lots of people out there that just philosophically disagree with that, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's weird. I don't get it, but I guess I
Yeah.
used to be one of those people. It's just been so long, but if I try to think back to how I was thinking when I was like a pretty committed liberal and Democrat, maybe I
Mhm.
guess what I was thinking is that it's good for people. And this is,
Yeah.
and this is something that would be good for you. And a lot of times you aren't going to be able to make the good decision. And so if we are better, that was when I believed that our betters were in government.
Yeah.
now
Yeah.
now I'm running for school board. I don't know if I told you this, but
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm
Yeah.
running for school board. And now that this is the first time I've run for anything, and just a few weeks in, that my election's not till November. But now that I'm doing this, I realize, like, and I'm like meeting with politicians and people, I'm like, no, these people aren't our betters. Like, there's a reason why you get sort of the you don't get the cream of the crop in politics. And I understand why now, because it is so hard. Like, there is so much at risk, and people judge you so harshly, like right away. Like, as soon as my name got thrown out there, suddenly there was people like having all kinds of opinions. And this is a school board race, but
Yeah.
the money that it takes, like, I have to raise $100,000. I mean, I'm just for a
Yeah.
school board race, so all of that is why certain narcissists, you got to be like a certain kind of narcissist to get
Yes,
into
you have to
politics.
think you know best, and there's a
Mhm.
certain, to even want that kind of position. But I think that's great that you're running for school board. That's one place where we really need, actual parents and local, it's local politics. That's where we still have a lot of control, and people need to get active there, whether they're going to stay in local politics or move beyond that. It's a big way to kind of push back against these policies and what
I'm
they're trying to
never
push.
running for anything ever again after this. After I
Yeah.
win this seat, that's it. I'm going to start training some people so that when it's time for me to leave, there's somebody good to come up
Yeah.
behind me, because this is absolutely insane. Like, I don't know, but it gives me a lot more compassion for the type of people that we put in government. Like, and maybe not compassion, but I was starting to get it. Like, I get why
Mhm.
some of them are morons and some of them are mean, and because you have to be a certain type of crazy
Yeah.
in order to do all of the things that it takes to jump through the gauntlet. And so, yeah, that's how it is. But I want to talk to you about celebrity. So we're going to talk about the slap.
Sounds good.
We got to talk about the slap.
I don't think anyone's talked about that yet.
I mean, I've seen the Bee has had some good slap headlines over
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
last week or so, but it's so funny, Adam, because I this year, well, the last 2 years, I have not watched award shows at all. And usually I'll at least tune in for the red carpets and the bigger awards, but COVID just drained so much fun. Like the first year, everyone's like, we're dressing down. And then I'm like, well, that's boring. Like, I want your crazy outfits. And then the second year, it was like, we're taking things more seriously. We're social distancing. We're moving it here. It just, and given all of what we've learned over COVID about how like some of these award shows are rigged, you know, they're like a lot of information has come out about how people get chosen and not chosen. It just bled so much of the fun out. So I had no interest in watching the Oscars this year. I still don't know who all won, but my husband was watching them. And I walked into the room. I sat down for 5 minutes, and it happened to be the 5 minutes of the slap. Like I literally sat down and saw Chris Rock make that joke. And then I knew right away, as soon as that delay hit, I'm like, oh, somebody cussed. And then all that ensued. So anyways, it just was funny that was the only 5 minutes that I caught. But of course, there's like
into the right part. Yeah.
I did. Of course, there was like a lot of talk about, should Will Smith lose his representation or lose projects, or did Chris Rock, was he really supposed to make the joke? But to start, I feel like my point of view on it is more like, this is kind of what's happening to like something is changing about the nature of celebrity over COVID. And I think we're forgetting that, like, while we've all been huddled in our little bubbles, like a lot of these celebrities, their lives have been condensed as well. And really, like pinched in, because a lot of them are used to going out and meeting people and having adoring fans and playing concerts, and they weren't able to do that. And so that's like a drug to a lot of people that they didn't get for the last 2 years. And so I felt like that slap was kind of indicative of a lot of maybe the pressure and also the bubble that's been forming around Hollywood that's really reinforced those walls because of COVID. We see them traveling and stuff, but it's not the same thing. They don't have their adoring audiences that they can meet face to face anymore. Most of them, again, like I said, it is like a drug. I don't know.
And how do you think that like would evolve into a situation like the slap? Like, you think Will Smith, that weighs on him not having that validation constantly? And
yes, I think all of it. So part of the problem is that, part of the problem is that his wife has her Red Table Talk show. And that's been like, she's just been spilling all the tea on that show. She's a gross oversharer. Her mother is also, and her daughter's turning out to be as well. I don't know about the dynamics of Will and Jada's relationship. I've known the gossip items over the years have always said they have an open marriage, and that Will's probably bisexual as well. And so there's issues that go on with it. Like, I don't think this is all Jada's fault. A lot of people are blaming her. I know, but so combine all of a sudden his whole life story being put out there by his own wife, even, whereas you used to have publicists that would address it. Combine that with the fact that he couldn't get out and work for a couple of years. He couldn't get out and get the validation where he needed to get it from. And he couldn't do sort of the normal things that he would do as a celebrity to sort of feed that lifestyle, that addiction that he has. I just think it all combined to make a moment where he felt so exposed. Like, if you look at that video, he laughed at that joke. Because that's
it's so bizarre, the turn. And I've looked, and I think other people have too, for like other camera angles that, because it's like you cut him 1 second and he's laughing, and you see Jada's face kind of sink behind him. And then the next time you see him, he's trudging up on stage. It's, you know.
Yeah, I think that what it was is his first reaction was the celebrity reaction. That was the right reaction, right? To laugh it off. But given everything that he's gone through, the microcosm that his life is under, how critical people have been of him, and how he allows his wife to handle their relationship. And then his wife sitting next to him going, you know what, this MFer. I just feel like it was a big hit to his ego when he saw his wife's face. It was kind of like, I have to stand up for myself. I have to be seen. I don't know.
It's interesting. I'd have to think about all that. I think I agree with you in that all of that stuff may be what was weighing on Will Smith, and maybe all of that contributed to his psychological state. I'd have to think about whether I think it's, emblematic of anything that's sort of a broader issue in Hollywood or something that all the celebrities are kind of dealing with right now. Because my whole take on the whole slap thing, so I wasn't watching the Oscars. I was on a flight back from my shows in Ohio during the Oscars. And like you, I used to love watching the Oscars. I saw every movie that was nominated, at least all the big ones. I loved watching, the hosts, whether it was somebody I thought was funny or not. I liked tuning in and watching it and seeing what they did. And then, yeah, over the last, 2 to 3 years, they've just gotten both dull in the way they're presented, and they nominate these obscure artsy films and message driven films. And you used to have films that were both artistically well made and were summer blockbusters. You'd have, like a Titanic or a Gladiator
Yeah,
or
like I
Jurassic
was just thinking
Park,
Gladiator.
things that people, you could both say are great directed, great written, and are fun movies that millions and millions of people go see. So you care about it. So yeah, I wasn't watching it. And then when I got off the flight and turned my phone back on, I just got all these text messages that were referencing it, but not saying what happened. It was just like, what did we just watch? What was that? Oh my gosh, did you see that? And I'm on the flight and I'm like, what did I miss? And so I get on Google, and of course the front page of every news site and everything on social media is just that freeze frame of, Will Smith just going across his face. Why I said I kind of agree with you that it contributed to maybe Will Smith's mental state is, my take on it is Will Smith clearly has issues that he's dealing with and had a breakdown there, whether his wife looking at him, triggered that, or he's insecure about something in their relationship, or trying to satisfy her or defend her or whatever. I think he lost his mind, did something crazy, and I think he should have been thrown out immediately, and I think he should have been charged with assault for it. As far as whether he should lose his Oscar, that's up to the Academy. I don't really have a strong stance on that. I think Chris Rock handled it incredibly well. You could see that moment where it clearly stunned him, and he tried to get some laughs and did successfully. And then when Will Smith starts yelling, keep my wife's name out of your effing mouth, you see him for a second, like as a comedian, he could have destroyed Will Smith in that moment. He goes, oh, keep my, and he goes, oh, okay, I'm going to let it go. It's like, I'm not going to go there. What I've sort of, have a lot of skepticism towards is all these think pieces being written about what we can learn from it in a broader context.
Sure, yeah.
I kind of think it was just, a celebrity with issues personally and in his marriage, and he snapped.
Yeah.
And he should suffer the consequences for that. There's been these things where comedians have tried to say, oh, this is emblematic of what comedians risk when they go on stage every night, or this is going to lead to more violence, or people thinking they can do this. I honestly don't think it is. Every now and then you hear stories about drunk hecklers throwing something or coming on stage, but it's not a lot higher risk than going out to any bar and there might be a drunk person there who starts a fight. I don't think it's something that's culturally common for people to come up and slap comedians. And I don't think it's going to increase after this. There were also, debates over whether it says something about like race or masculinity and all this stuff. I don't really think there's a broader message there in any sense. There were people who were asking, oh, would he have done this to Ricky Gervais or a different host if it was the same situation? Honestly, if he'd say the same comfort level with them, because I think he and Chris Rock had worked together before, I think it probably would have been the same if he had that same reaction. And then I'm trying to think of the other hot takes. There was one where people were like, oh, why does the country care about this when there's people dying?
That's the worst.
And I'm like, those aren't mutually exclusive things.
I know.
You can be horrified with what's happening in Ukraine and also be shocked by this, shocking.
Walk and chew gum at the same time. It's fine.
So, I think it was certainly a shocking moment. I think Will Smith should suffer the consequences for it. I think Chris Rock handled it well. I'm always sort of a little skeptical of trying to say there was some bigger cultural message to take away.
I think you're absolutely right. I actually don't agree with you on the assault charges. I just don't see.
Oh, really?
Purpose. Yeah, but I think he absolutely should have been thrown out. They knew he was getting an Oscar, and that's why they let him stay. The Academy is being silly about they keep switching their story. They keep going, oh, we did ask him to leave, and he wouldn't. And he was like, no, that's not true. And who knows what's true? But also Will Smith is one of the most powerful people in Hollywood right now. I mean, as far as actors, he has a huge production company. He produces a lot of what you watch out there. Cobra Kai is what I'm thinking of right now, which is a huge, cultural phenomenon.
Oh, he produces that? I didn't even know that.
He has he has his hands in a lot of things. So he's got a lot of projects going and he employs a lot of people. But yeah, I think he absolutely should have been kicked out. I mean, I think he just lost his mind for a second there, whatever history him and Chris Rock have, obviously there's more to that story and whatever. I mean, it was totally inappropriate no matter who did it or what color they were or gender, because you're at work. You don't walk up to someone at work and slap them in the face. That's absolutely not something that happens at the office.
And it was so odd on so many levels. I think it's just it's a weird situation, but there's so much like that alopecia or the bald head, the G.I. Jane joke.
Yeah.
As much as I love Chris Rock and he's a brilliant comedian, that was like a throwaway joke. Like
that was a total.
Had Will Smith not slapped him anymore, no one would have remembered that joke 10 seconds later.
Yes.
It was such a like weak kind of just whatever kind of joke. And then it became this whole thing. And it's so weird how it wasn't like Will Smith. If he had been talking to Chris Rock face to face and he said that and he just snapped and slapped him, that would be bad enough. But he had so much time to like think about it. Like you just picture at any moment now you can decide not to do what you're about to do.
Oh my
and he just walks up there for 20 seconds, slaps him, and then walks back down.
You gotta walk like full half mile to the stage.
At no point you were like, oh, maybe I shouldn't go through with this.
Well, I did hear that they did have words before the ceremony that they were this is gossip. Chris Rock he's made jokes about that, the two of them on the Oscars stage before, because he used to host the Oscars and I guess they never really had a great sense of humor about it. And the gossip items say that, Will Smith knew he was presenting and knew he was getting an Oscar. So he knew like that he'd be on the table, right, for any jokes. And so he asked Chris that he wouldn't make any jokes about him and Jada that night. So to me, when I saw Chris Rock, I'm with you. That joke was totally throwaway. It was a nothing joke. To me, I thought that was him going, because like if you ask a comedian not to joke about you, that's the thing they're going to joke about,
I feel that anytime you're told don't joke about this, it's like, oh, how can I joke about that?
If somebody is telling you,
I wasn't even gonna joke about that, but now I want to.
No doubt. If someone is telling you don't read that book, you should read that book. If someone is saying you don't need that right, then you definitely need that right. And so I thought, well, maybe he was like, this is my compromise, right? I'm just doing a silly joke. So I'm still joking about them, but I thought so. But then there was a few moments there where you noticed Chris Rock just standing there looking like sad and confused, like after Will started screaming, and you could just see his wheels turning, like, what am I watching? Like, how can this guy go off on me like this right now? This is insane. I think he did a great job, but I think he was really even more shaken up than maybe people knew at the time.
Yeah, I think he was definitely more shaken than people knew. And I think I don't even think he processed it completely immediately when he got slapped, because when he said, what, Will Smith slapped the SHIT out of me.
Yeah.
And then he just and that got a laugh. But I think he was still processing what just happened. And you can tell the audience, there was a lot of people afterwards saying it was staged or something. And it definitely was not staged.
No.
But in that moment, I think people watching and even in that room were trying to figure out if this was some sort of bit they were doing, because there was laughter at first, and then when you watch the people behind them as Will Smith starts, you see their faces kind of sink, and they're like, oh, this is real. This is, something's going down here.
It was definitely the craziest moment, but I think it was really like there's been brief discussions about like, well, maybe you don't joke about a man's wife or whatever, but the truth is, Chris Rock's a comedian, so all of that talk is off the table. I don't care who you are. But B, it wasn't just that he lost his mind in that moment. That category was the best documentary film category. That is it, and for all intents and purposes, a pretty obscure category, right? People aren't tuning into the Oscars to see best documentary. Documentary filmmaking is arduous. It's a long process. It requires a lot of academic work. And people who make documentaries for a living do it for the love of it. And the best you can hope for, you know, the pinnacle of what you can hope for as far as public recognition is hearing your name read at the Oscars. And no one remembers any of those people. You know, Questlove, his documentary won Summer of Soul, and which is a great documentary. And he tried to like bring it back full circle. He made sure to mention the names of the other documentaries that were up. But I thought like Will Smith stole that moment from those people who worked so hard for it. And then he got to enjoy the moment that they didn't get to enjoy. He had his big Oscar moments. And then it wasn't just that, but it was the first Oscars that had a Black showrunner, and it was hosted by 2 Black women. And so it should have been like a great night for like Black creativity and all of that stuff. And instead it was all about Will Smith. I mean, I think that deserves some shame, some level of shame.
Yeah.
And he absolutely should have been kicked out. And frankly, I do think that Oscar should be revoked.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't think assault charges should be pressed. And I don't even think Chris Rock would want that. But
Chris Rock doesn't. Yeah, Chris Rock said he does.
I think they should revoke that Oscar, because that is, you would imagine if that happened at a work event, you know, just your office job, you're going to pay a price for that. He has to pay some kind of price for what he did.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think the reason I'm on the fence, I'm not opposed to him losing the Oscar. I think the reason I'm on the fence about it is I always go through the thing of, can you separate the art from the artist? Now, I think there's been much more severe examples of artists doing horrible things in their personal lives and then still being honored for it. So to me, why I say it's kind of up to the Academy is I feel like Will Smith acted well in that movie, and that award worked for the job he did in that King Richard movie. And if his work earned him that honor, I kind of see, is that separate from if he does a terrible thing, even if it's at that event. That's why I'm kind of, and it's not like I come down hard on one side or the other. Yeah. I just don't have a firm opinion about it, because I'm fine with him getting thrown out and then mailing him the Oscar a week later and saying, here's what you missed.
He absolutely should not have been allowed to go up and accept that.
Oh yeah, Oscar. It was insane.
No, that was insane. And then for him to go out and party afterwards, like that feels insane. And like, I don't know what I expect the people around him to do. Like, I got to go to this party and Will Smith's here. I guess, I want to have a good time too. So it's not like I'm suggesting people like turn away from him on the red carpet, but it just like, what a weird, it just became, he robbed a lot of people of a good night and of having their accomplishments recognized. And hardly anyone is going to remember some of the firsts that happened that night because of Will, but mostly I'm just disappointed for all of those documentary makers. Some of them were foreign, some of them were from, so this was like a really big deal to them. So Will Smith, I think you at least owe them an apology, and you should fund all their next projects. I think it's the least he can do.
That'd be fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm running out of time here, and I wanted to get to a dating section because I'm having an ongoing.
I feel like if we don't get a lot of time this time, I feel like, I don't want to angle to become the first third guest before you get any other second guest. But if we don't have a lot of time to talk about, we could do a whole podcast, I feel, about dating in LA.
Dude, I think I have like 4 or 5 podcasts to do. I might do a little series because I keep talking to people and like adding things. So my producer and I are having this ongoing argument. He's in his 30s. He's a single guy, pretty successful where he lives. And he keeps saying that there's just like no good women out there. And he keeps getting hooked up with like gold diggers or like girls that come off as classy, but then they like turn out to be something else. And they're never a girl he can bring home to mom. And my thing is like, maybe there's no good women left, or maybe you're picking the wrong women. But you have to understand, he lives in Cleveland and you live in LA, and those are actually 2 very different places.
Yeah, it's extremely different dating markets. I'm sure some of, I have found it very hard to find good dating partners as far as like finding a good woman to be in a relationship with. I think a lot of it has to do with culture in general right now. I think it's very, I don't think it's entirely inaccurate to say there's no good, or it's hard to find good women out there. I won't say there's no good women, because there certainly are, but it's hard to find good women, and it's hard to form relationships right now, because I think there is so much
Mm.
working against that, both culturally in the sense of like gender politics, and in the sense of the way dating apps and social media and just the mobility people have to move around the country to meet thousands of different people. The entire landscape of dating, I think, has changed even over the last 10 to 15 years. I find dating very difficult and frustrating now in Los Angeles. And when I think back when I lived in New York 10 to 15 years ago, it honestly wasn't this confusing or crappy or hard to try to find relationships. I don't find it hard to meet women in LA or to get dates in LA.
Mhm.
I find it nearly impossible to form long-term relationships in LA.
Well, what is it because like I have so many friends who are like, I can't, like, there's no good guys out there. And then my guy friends are like, there's no good girls out there. And I'm like, well, I have good guy friends and I have good girlfriends.
Uh-huh.
You know, why aren't they finding, I mean, you guys all live in different places, but what I'm saying is like, why aren't they finding people like them? Because I know people like you know, I know people
Yeah.
that are out there. Why can't you find them, Adam?
Well, like I said, I feel like we need an hour to get through all the and longer to get through all the different issues. I know a few of them. So when you're saying, you know, guys like me and guys like and girls that are, do you honestly think the men you're thinking of and the women you're thinking of, as well as you know them, do you think they are like high value? Do you think they are good partners for a mate, both the men and the women that you're thinking of? Or do they have things where you're like, oh, I can kind of see why this girls might not want to be with this guy, or guys might not want to be with this girl?
Eh,
Because
yeah,
where I'm going with that is,
maybe
I
there are
think
some things.
I
Yeah.
think to some degree, both men and women need they both want the most high value partner they can find, but they're not always making themselves as high value
That's really good
that they can
point.
be. I think that plays a part of it. In LA particularly, I think it's hard because both the transitory nature of people who move here to pursue something and then move away, or they have a job where they
Mhm.
travel a lot, it makes it hard to connect. It's also just a numbers game. You know, in the previous generation, you grew up in your hometown, maybe you moved to a city, you meet a certain number of people in your life, and hopefully the one that you find the most attractive and have the most in connection with, you settle down and make a relationship work. Now you can move all over the country. You can meet 100 new people all the time, every year, anywhere you go. And with social media, you can always see every other, whether it's someone who's more attractive, whether it's someone who makes more money, whether it's someone who's more successful. The options are endless. In LA, for every girl out here, there is always a richer, more successful guy coming along. For every guy out here, there's always a younger, more attractive woman coming along.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's people that they have a hard time settling because of that. They have a hard time picking one person and forming that bond. And you know, when it comes to social media, both like Instagram and the dating apps, there's a way that I I, I think this psychologically is more of a thing for women, although I think there's ways that the apps are psychologically bad for men as well. But they can get validation from 100 guys. They can post a bikini pic on Instagram
Mm-hmm.
and they get 1,000 likes. And it's like that validates them. They're not looking for one guy to validate them. They have all these guys that are constantly fawning over them on, you know, social media and things like that. I'm trying to think of like some of the other things, you know, and a lot of women in LA or the big cities are high achieving women. They're they have, you know, whether they're starting a business, whether they're actresses, whether they're, you know, working in finance. When you move to these cities, women tend to want to date a man who is either as successful, more successful, or makes more money than them, or they at least see
Yeah.
as either an equal or a better. And that dating pool gets smaller and smaller the more successful they are personally. Men want to date women based a lot of times on looks, personality, how they think they'd be as a wife and a mother. A man, these guys at the top, they have the option of not just the highly successful woman, but every woman below that. So, women are competing. There's this, what is it? There's a statistic where they say like 80, like 100% of women are competing for the top 20% of guys, basically.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I bet in
And
LA that's like competing for the top 10% or
yeah,
5%.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
I wanted to ask you, because I know like Darvio's going to listen to this episode, he's going to edit it. He's going to be like, Kara, see, that's what I'm trying to tell you. Cause like, he has kind of said kind of the same thing to me.
Yeah.
The pool is different, and, and like, I've been married for 23 years and it's not like men and women haven't really changed. The relation, like the tools we use to relate to each other have changed though. And that kind of changes, like for me, you're right. I just had the option of one guy pursuing me at a time, and I don't know how my prospects would have changed if I had the door open to so many other people. So I do feel like, it's about what you want, right? It's like about,
If you want to say the most controversial thing, that I'll say this interview is something we could get into, in a longer one, or you could talk about with other people. I think you can fairly say, because I know both men and women complain about dating, complain about the opposite sex, complain how hard it is. What I will say, and I'm probably biased on this because I'm a man, I think you can point out bad behaviors by both men and women, and behaviors and beliefs that are not conducive to forming lasting monogamous relationships. Where I think it's worse with women right now, I feel that culture, both in terms of gender politics, pop culture, and in some cases the law, enable the worst behaviors in women. They encourage the worst behaviors in women, and they condemn nearly all behaviors in man.
I agree.
Masculinity is almost any choice a man makes. If he's too aggressive, he's terrible. If he's too passive, he's terrible. If he's successful, then he wants, a woman who likes him for his money. If he's not making enough, then he's a failure. And why should a woman like him? He's an incel. I think there are certainly men who are, what do they like the term F-boy, and stuff like that. There are guys out there who are sleeping with as many women as possible, things like this. And you can say those are toxic behaviors. But I think when you look at the entire male population, the entire female population, I think there's this weird gender politics right now where, as we're sort of condemning traditional gender roles, we're also ignoring a sort of necessary difference between the sexes, where we're supposed to need each other. And there's certain things that a man is going to be attracted to femininity in a woman, and a woman is going to be attracted to masculinity in a man. And no amount of, social constructs, or no amount of politics is going to change what people are actually psychologically attracted to in the opposite sex.
No, I think you're right. I think the breakdown of gender roles has been terrible for romance, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I think, like, I always tell women, who are like, I don't need a man. What man wants to be told he's not needed? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's not the way to get, like, Hollywood gives you this version of the strong, independent woman who don't need no man. But that version of us is a lie. It's a lie that gets sold to us. And then it gets spit back out as harshness, as coldness, as selfishness. But men need to be needed. Men are providers and women are nurturers. And that's it. Men are givers and women are receivers. And I mean, that is a very traditional, it's not traditional. It's just biological. It just is what it is. But I think you're right. When some women are not willing to let a man be a man, then it feels like a red flag. This is why I think a lot of older men go for younger women too. You kind of nailed it with the, like, professional circle getting smaller and smaller. I think, Adam, what we're drilling down on here is the real problem is women and jobs. Women should never have had the right to work. I think that's the biggest problem.
That can be your quote. That can be your quote coming out of this. I won't say that. Another interesting statistic that's related to all this, there's this idea of hypergamy, which is women date across and up social hierarchies, and men tend to date like across and down, as far as both men and women want someone who's like attractive, like the physical sort of biological attractors, or they're both attractive. But when it comes to things like financial stability, careers, even your perception of how strong or smart someone is, women want someone equal or better, and men want someone equal or down generally. That's just kind of how they wind up dating.
Mhm.
But women are more selective. There was this study with the dating apps, and I think they've replicated this study with just sort of doing psychological tests where they give people examples of men and women on each side. Women swipe right, so they like 4% of the men that they go through on social media apps. Men like 60% and up of the women that they swipe on dating. So women are pursuing 4% of the available guys out there, and guys are pursuing 60% and up of the women that are out there.
Yes, well, that is biological too, because women have
Yeah.
to be more discerning. We can't just
Yes.
give our childbearing years.
It has to do with reproduction and fertility.
Yes,
Exactly. Yeah.
all of that. And we mess with it. The pill messed with that. I mean,
Yes.
and I'm a great beneficiary of all of that freedom, but I'm a fool to not notice how these have changed.
Yeah, and the pill detached sex from
family.
pregnancy and
Yeah.
essentially settling down and having a family. It made consequence-free sex easier for both sexes. And there's an interesting debate over whether that was a success for sort of women and feminism, that they could control whether they get pregnant or not much easier. But in the long run, did that make things better or worse for women in the terms of making sex so kind of consequence free?
It made it worse, ladies. It made it worse. I mean, there's just my daughter and I watch.
I like that you'll take all the controversial positions. I can lay out all the details to get you there, but then I don't want to be on record saying, I don't want to be on video saying, then you can fill in the answer.
Adam Yenser of the Battle League says that women should not work. Politico love to get a hold of that headline. No, you know what? I was going to go on, but I have to go.
Oh yeah. We've done an hour, man. Time flies when I'm talking to you.
Time flies. We're having so much fun. No, okay. You know what, Adam? Let's schedule you for next month, and let's do this dating conversation, like full circle, because we have so much. It's how we first kind of connected. We were at the B, we were talking about this, that, and the other, and then you said some things about dating and trying to find someone. I'm like, yeah, and my son is
you mentioned your son goes through a lot of that, and you're kind of worried what the world would be like for him in that sense.
And I mean, I've been married for 23 years and I know some stuff, but there's a lot I don't know about what it's like to be dating out there too. And so I am trying to educate myself. Do you hear that, Darvio? I'm trying to educate myself. All right, but what I really want to do is make sure that I figure out how to solve all of my friends' romantic problems. So hopefully, Adam, let's schedule for next month, and then hopefully we will have such an amazing conversation that it will just like fix all the issues that you need fixed, and then maybe some amazing woman will be watching and be like, you know what, I'm ready to settle down and give my life to this guy. That won't be creepy at all. She just saw you on a podcast. I was like, I want to marry this guy, but maybe anyway, we'll see how it goes. Let's just see how that
sounds good. I look forward to it.
All right. Thanks, Adam. Well, I'll talk to you later. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.